Welcome to Cigar City Radio, episode number 10. I'm your host, Randy Ojeda, and making the magic happen is Jason Solanez.
Randy, jingle bells, Batman smells.
Is that all you got?
That's as bad as it gets on this episode.
All right.
If you like Cigar City Radio, we hope you subscribe, whether you're listening to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or direct from cigarcitymanagement.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Cigar City Radio. Let us know what you think of the show. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Our guest on this episode is the Grammy-nominated, platinum-selling singer-songwriter Shawn Mullins. He's best known for his single Lullaby, which hit number 1 on the Billboard Adult Top 40 charts. But he's been making music for several decades. He has a discography full of quality albums, and he fills rooms everywhere he goes. What I think is really cool about Shawn Mullins is that he was an independent artist for almost 10 years before he got a hit song, before he had a record deal. I talk to artists all the time who get anxious about things not moving fast enough for them, but a career like Shawn's is proof that sometimes, if you just keep making great music, you can get there. For tour dates and links, head over to ShawnMullins.com. So here it is, episode 10. Shawn, I can safely say that you are the first platinum award-winning artist to come on our show. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to come and hang out with us.
Well, not a big deal. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Right
Thanks
on,
for
man.
having me.
Yeah. So that was, your first record, or was it the first major release that you had? I would say it was Soul's Core.
Yeah, it was the first one that anyone knew about, but I had a bunch of records before that, and I was an indie artist for about 9.5 years. So that was my 8th record that I'd put out. I'd put out 6 studio records and 2 live records from 1989 until 1998. And then, stuff kind of blew up with Soul's Core because of Lullaby, and then everyone kind of assumed that it was my first thing. Because, Because I was mostly playing little tiny places around, little tip rooms and tiny folk clubs or bars and, house concerts, wherever you could,
Well, I think that's what's really cool about, the song Lullaby, and by extension the record Soul's Core, is that it seemed like an organic thing, it started with like local radio that was playing it in Atlanta, and then it grew to national radio and went from there. It wasn't like, especially around that time in the late 90s, it was like everything was so calculated, like manufactured in a way that people just gravitated to this song. Like,
and looking back on it, especially, I didn't think about getting a record deal at that point. Let's put it that way. And so it was interesting because all of a sudden, after like 9.5 years of not having really, maybe a tiny bit of interest from 1 or 2 people that would come and see me when I'd go through New York, but no kind of real interest because it just frankly wasn't hip. I mean, it just, like when I first started shopping for deals, it was all about grunge. It was early 90s, and acoustic music wasn't really the thing, especially what I do with acoustic music. So there may have not been enough edge to what I did or something. I don't know. I never figured it out, but I didn't worry about it after a few years. I just kept rolling with it and making my own cheap records and getting out there and playing a bunch, and really touring hard. And so, yeah, it I don't know if I'm answering your question or not.
Oh, no, you totally are. It's okay. It's not a question, but that's really cool. I love that. I mean, you just went from being this independent artist to like shoved onto tours with like the Backstreet Boys and Destiny's Child. Like,
especially the radio shows that's when I would do a lot of those.
Yeah,
I would get kind of they would use people like me or Edwin McCain or what's the guy that had the. He's kind of a solo guy, but he's kind of half acoustic, half hip hop. Everlast.
Oh yeah.
he would do stuff at that time too, where they would have, you know, these huge radio shows like the Z100 Jingle Ball or whatever.
I was going to say
Madison.
Jingle Ball, yeah.
There's a bunch of them, but some of the big ones is that one at Madison Square Gardens, and so, you know, it's big. It's a big crowd. And then they have you know, like NSYNC or Backstreet Boys or both at one of those. And the only kind of Rudy stuff that was more like live musicians playing were the Bare Naked Ladies, and they were really good. But most of it was pretty, like you were saying, calculated and, you know, really great entertainment, though.
Yeah.
I mean, one of them, I can't remember. I get them confused, and I feel bad about that. But I think it was Backstreet Boys came down from the ceiling and with astronaut uniforms or costumes. I guess you'd call them costumes. And they were rappelling down, you know, like that's how they entered. And my little thing was me and an acoustic guitar, like on the satellite stage out front, you know, just like while they're probably setting up, you know, the
Behind
fireworks for the stuff that's coming after me.
So you never came down from the rafters in an astronaut suit?
Never did it.
Oh, man.
But I watched it. I saw it happen a few times. But yeah, and that was a blast, though, man. I mean, I felt kind of old, I'll be honest. I was 29, and a lot of these guys were really young, and not that that's bad. I just felt old. I mean, I felt old at 29, like doing shows with some of those folks, because it was so different than what I was listening to. And I remember liking Madonna and Cyndi Lauper, and, you know, into the 80s, people like Whitney Houston. I mean, there's great artists that are more pop related, and I dig that stuff.
Yeah.
But some of that stuff, I was really by the late 90s, if I was listening to other artists, it was probably, you know, someone like James McMurtry or, you know, people that are really writing, you know, really from the truthful place.
Yeah.
And it's not so much about the entertainment and the look of it, and not even maybe the sound of it. Like sometimes it's just like the communication of the song. And so I got really into that, you know, by the time I was signed, and I just didn't care one way or the other about getting signed when it all kind of rolled in. So it was funny.
Yeah. It's kind of like how sometimes you fall into a relationship, like when you're not looking for one, you know, it's never like, you know, if you're going out there about the town, you'll never find anybody kind of thing. Yeah. But that's interesting.
It may have changed my attitude and made me, I mean, I'm sure the song was it was the big thing. That was what everyone wanted, was that song.
Yeah, it was a number one hit, you know.
Well, they knew they could make it into that.
Yeah.
So it was already rolling, and everyone had that feeling. And so there was a bidding war, but even still, the rest of that record's not really that way. There's a few band songs on it, but most of it's really acoustic driven, and it's stories and not a lot of drum loops. I think that's the only song I used a drum loop on the whole record.
That one even had a little bit more of a hip hop type influence in like the verses and stuff, I think.
I will say this, influences that are obvious drawn from hip hop. The most obvious one for me is Michael Franti's early work with Spearhead.
Yeah, right on.
You know, the Home album was a really big one for me. Yeah. And his baritone, I could sing along and speak along, and I loved what he talked about, and I loved the positiveness of it, and also that he was telling the truth. And so all that stuff, and then, you know, Gil Scott-Heron, and I had a friend years and years ago turn me on to Gil Scott-Heron, who probably would have hated me, but I can say that I just love that brutal honesty and the guts to say that stuff when he was saying it, especially. So yeah, I've listened to a lot of really great artists that I think have influenced me, but typically going back. I'll occasionally hear something that's new that really blows me away, but usually I'm still discovering stuff I don't know from the past, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's so much out there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, like, even on Spotify, you know, like, you go to your page and you see, like, related artists. It'll have, like, Sister Hazel and, you know, Hootie and the Blowfish. But, like, especially your later records, and especially My Stupid Heart, the most recent one, it's, like, it's much more, like, Leonard Cohen, John Hyatt-esque than it is, you know, like Hootie and the Blowfish, you know? Right. So are you in a place still where, like, do people come out to the shows expecting to see the Lullaby guy, or has it changed where now your fans have kind of grown with you?
Well, I'm sure there's some people at every show that are in that position where they're like, wow, he doesn't look like he used to, or what is all this stuff? I want to hear Lullaby. I'm sure that happens. I don't really feel that so much from the audience, but I think a lot of them are more, they've grown with me, I think, because the audience isn't, each record, there's not like a big explosion of audience differences at my shows, and it also doesn't go down. It kind of is. You
have your base.
It's kind of a thing. It's a base. It's not huge. It's a several hundred people in every town I play typically.
Yeah, but that's a great position to be in. I mean,
I love it. It's always kind of where I wanted to be when in that beginning time when I was out there on my own. That's what I dreamed of. Was like one day I won't be playing to 10 people, for tips. One day if I keep doing this, by the time I'm an old guy, I can play the little theaters, and that's really kind of still where I am. It's because I got even then that those were the appropriate spaces for like a storyteller, songwriter. You kind of want to be in a small enough setting that it feels right to everyone, kind of living room vibe or whatever the vibe is, but cozy and warm. But it needs to fit enough people to pay you too. And so there's all kinds of little things you have to think about.
Yeah, sure. But it's just cool though that you can, you could probably go to most towns and play a space like that works for you.
Oh, but to comment on Sister Hazel, those guys and the Hootie guys too. We didn't do a lot together before I got signed actually. But I think some people think we're all from the same basic scene of music. Right. Which they're really different. Like the Greenville, Columbia, South Carolina scenes are even different.
Yeah, sure.
Like Greenville was Edwin. Columbia was Hootie. And then, you got Athens and Atlanta. Completely different music scenes.
Very different.
And then, his Sister Hazel guys are from Gainesville, Florida. And so, but I think because we were all from that basic South, there was a lump of all of us, even though none of our music really, I guess it's white guys playing acoustic guitars. So you got that.
That's a pretty broad genre, though.
It is. But I can see that. I can go, okay, especially me and Edwin, it was like, right around the same time. But I'm friends with all those guys still, so there is a relative. There's something that we share together, having done some touring together, and maybe from all being from the same region.
Yeah, maybe.
And that may be why we're showing up on that together, because the music's really not that similar.
But I think it's based on the playlist algorithms and stuff. So people that like Hootie and the Blowfish might also like Shawn Mullins. That's
I know.
Even though the music's different,
I've tried not to worry about it too much because I would get really confused about that stuff. I would be like, at first when I would see that on Spotify or Pandora, or there's other ones, right? There's where you
kind of Apple Music and all that,
like music that's like this.
Yeah.
If you like this, you might also like this. So they would, if it was Shawn Mullins, my friend pointed out that one of the other artists was James Blunt, and I was like, okay, I can see that it's a singer-songwriter.
Yeah, that's cool.
White guy with an acoustic guitar again.
British white guy, though.
British white guy, yeah. And then there was another one. What was the other one that...
I don't
Vertical
know.
Horizon.
Okay.
I can't think of his name right now. He's a really smart guitar player and singer-songwriter. But that's another one that will pop up that's like, if you like Shawn Mullins, you might like... And I'm like...
Yeah.
And when I listen to and I like Vertical Horizon... And I'm not known for liking my own songs, especially after I've recorded them. I don't really want to hear them anymore on those recordings. I just kind of move on. But so I love to hear other stuff, but I don't see many similarities.
It's an algorithm, and that's kind of the difference in music now. Is it used to be like, you relied on the DJs. They'd play the stuff that they thought the people would like. And now it's the computers deciding, well, this is what you're going to like because we have all this data of you listening to this,
Gotcha.
It's very weird.
Yeah,
music industry is very weird
cool.
now.
It's interesting. It's a pioneer age, and it's also scary and all that stuff. There's a lot that seems to be going away, and at the same time, there's so much new.
Yeah,
so it's interesting.
It's definitely
I'm mostly
the Wild
sitting back and watching right now.
Yeah,
like I'm kind of keeping it to shows, and I don't know, live record next. I'm not really. I don't know why I'd bother putting out another record real fast.
Yeah.
What's the hurry?
It's true. I mean, you can sit on a record for a while these days.
I've wondered about releasing singles only, you know, like a song a month or a song, you know, because I always thought that albums were the thing, you know, because I grew up with that, you know.
Yeah. Well, I like the story that an album can tell, you know, whether, even if it's not like a conceptual thing, but just, you know, you can see the place where the artist was when they wrote it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And CDs could still do that in a way, even though you don't have to flip it. There was something even in the time of flipping, you know, like let's say Revolver, you get to that first side and that moment that it takes to flip the record gives you this pause for thought, right?
Yeah.
And now there's the second side. So there was something really special about that. When CDs came along, I embraced that because it's like, wait, this is a lot easier, you know?
Yeah.
Although I kind of dig cassettes too. And they still kind of sound good, even though there's that tape hiss in it. There's something that's kind of nice and, well, analog, you know?
Yeah.
But now there's no tangible, there's nothing to hold on to anymore. And so that starts to get a little weird in a way, isn't it? I mean, if you just think about it that way, that the actual listening, you don't really have to have anything other than, well, you need a smartphone or a computer, but you don't need any player or there's no product to play.
Yeah. Or to buy, you know, like there's, you know, people are streaming it or just, you know, it's on a list with hundreds of other songs that you could listen to.
And I feel really fortunate to have done as well as I did, you know, as a songwriter, because now it's really hard.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm still okay. But I had a worldwide huge hit. You know, it's like, how many people get that opportunity? You know, I was really lucky and really fortunate because I got tons of friends that, you know, they got a soundtrack here and there, or they had a commercial years ago, and you get some money here and there, but man, it's a struggle, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel that more than ever now with the streaming, but what I really wanted to communicate was that I feel really fortunate to have gotten to see the other side of it before it all kind of crashed, you know? That was kind of amazing because when I got signed, it was all like, you know, woohoo.
Yeah.
Late 90s, you know.
All the labels were throwing mega dollars at everything, and that's dried up now. Like, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And do you find yourself writing more for others now than you, because I know it was like 5 years between your last couple records. So were you?
Yeah, during that time I did.
Yeah. I know you worked with like the Zac Brown band.
Yeah, I did some of that. And
Matthew Sweet, I think, too.
And some other country artists that people just haven't heard yet, you know, on the mass level. But I try to, you know, that's been a different thing for me. I love Nashville, and I always have loved it. It's really different now. It's like, it's really cool. And I liked it before when it wasn't what most people would think was a cool city, you know.
Okay, yeah.
It was just kind of like, it had a lot of grit, you know, and it still does, but it's really cleaning up in a lot of ways, and it's a nice place to go. It really is. And the industry there is amazing. And so the songwriting scene there is, you know, everyone there's a songwriter. So, it's a weird thing. I'm not used to feeling competitive in the art of songwriting and the craft of it. Even I don't feel competitive.
Yeah.
It's not part of what I'm doing. So that whole thing's very competitive, and it's like more so than I ever experienced. And they're not even competitive with me. It's just you feel all of a sudden like you're in a competition.
Yeah.
To get it done quick and get it done because we got 3 hours. Let's write this song.
Yeah.
And
that's got to be weird for creativity to just like lock yourselves in a room with somebody you maybe never met, and they say, "Hey,
oftentimes,
write this song." You know,
I think that's why we're ending up. I mean, I don't really hate to say it. I think that's why a lot of popular country music that we're hearing on the radio, and possibly a lot of what's written in LA and New York, is done in a similar way for like the pop artists. But I think there's a difference between what Linda Perry does, though, and like what the 3 guys sitting in a room for 3 hours in Nashville does, because of her background as being a real artist and kind of having that not perfect voice. You know, there's something really kind of like witchy about her sound in a cool way. So when you get 3 people in a Nashville, or 5 sometimes, or whatever it is, and yes, exactly, you don't know each other, and it's such an intimate thing. It's almost like you better have friendships with these people in a way to be able to share what you need to share to get to a good thing, to get to something that's really worth it. And I think occasionally stuff happens, of course, that slips through because they're great writers doing that just as well as there are not so great, because there's some great songwriters there. There really are. And if the right couple of them get together, sometimes it'll happen, you know?
Yeah.
I've seen it to where it doesn't too, where nothing happens with 2 great songwriters.
Wow.
It's like, we want to go get some lunch, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's got to be interesting too, because, you know, as you said, like, your music is very honest. You are very much in your own writing. Do you struggle sometimes to write with somebody else's voice?
Not really, but I learned to do it writing with other people that did it a lot more than me. I just kind of like opened up to that idea. And my friend Chuck Cannon said that that's something he's really learned to do over the years is write for that artist's voice.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about Chuck Cannon. How did you get started working with him?
Well, we met like around 99 or 2000, but I didn't remember it.
Okay. Was it just that time, you know, time period where everything's hazy?
It was. It was that, and he opened a show for me in Nashville, and I didn't really remember it. And the reason why I even mentioned that is because it was, you know, 8 years later or something. We were both playing this festival in Asheville, North Carolina, and we're staying at the same hotel. And we hooked up basically there and started talking. And I told him it was really nice to meet him. And he said, well, man, we met, but it was like 1999. I know you were in the middle of a bunch of stuff. And he goes, man, you gave me your phone number, and then I called you the next morning, and you said, who's this? And I said, it's Chuck Cannon. And I was like, I don't know any Chuck Cannon.
Oh, man.
I was like, man, I'm really sorry, dude. I don't have any recollection of that. I said it was crazy time. Like, I could barely keep up with my anything, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, we became friends. We laughed about that. And then we became friends first. And then I went out to his place in Nashville, which is really not in Nashville at all. It's out in the woods, about 20 minutes west. And the foothills, really beautiful.
Not a bad place to be.
And just no noises, and so yeah, it's a great place to write and record. It's where we recorded the record too.
Oh, okay, right on.
Yeah.
And that was did you start working with him on My Stupid Heart, or was it the previous record?
The Light You Up record, yeah.
Okay.
The one before this is when we started writing a lot together. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's my main guy. I mean, when I think about presenting an idea to someone, he's the first person that I might run a new idea by. Although I have to be careful, because if I'm not done with the song, he'll just go ahead and finish it for me. He'll just do it real fast too.
Yeah.
And then you're like, damn, man. You know, now
you wanted some of that.
Yeah. And I've learned that it's not intended in any way, although he just gets excited about something.
Maybe that's cool. I mean, that's
great.
I
love it. I mean, that's one thing about songwriting, I think, is your ego has to be kind of checked, you know. Like,
yeah,
because if you can't open that up a little bit or keep it down or however you want to look at it, it's going to be hard to dig deep enough to get anything real, you know.
Yeah, that's totally true. Yeah, you really gotta leave your ego at the door when you.
Yeah, and in both ways, like you can't be too fragile either. You know, you got to be strong.
True,
but you can't be like walking in there like, we're gonna do this my way.
Yeah,
because it won't work. not co-writing, you know.
Yeah,
and I think it's like that with any kind of co-writing. I would imagine comedy shows. Can you imagine when they've got like 10 writers or whatever?
Oh, sure, yeah.
All of them with big egos that are really, really good.
Everybody trying to push for their joke to get in. Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah, that would be rough. So speaking of like comedy shows, actually, I was pretty young when Lullaby came out.
Yeah.
I remember listening to it in the car or whatever, but it wasn't until years later I was watching the show Scrubs, and the song All in My Head is used in one of the episodes.
Right.
And I was like, man, this song's awesome. Like, I need to figure out who this is. And that's when I looked up and I realized, oh, this is the same guy that wrote Lullaby, blah, blah. It wasn't until Live at the Variety Playhouse, that live record, where I was like, okay, this guy this guy can rock. Hearing the songs again live, the older songs and then your newer songs, it's like there's such a different energy.
It's interesting because I think on this record I came closer to what happens in a live performance. I think I know what you're talking about is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's a certain energy that's captured,
Yeah, and I've seen it with a few other artists. A lot of people, you don't really notice that much of a difference, or there are major differences, but they're not in the difference of that, right? Of attitude or whatever.
Well, and especially like compared to the 90s stuff that you had, where it had sort of this polished production, this sort of 90s sheen that they were putting on a lot of these records.
Right.
To hear it a little grittier, a little grungier with just you and a guitar or you with a backing band is a totally different experience.
Yeah, thanks. Kind of for years now, we've recorded differently, where we're kind of cutting stuff as live as possible. But it is different. It's a different when you don't have an audience. There's a famous story about Stipe when they were making one of their records. He had a couple of friends do big cutouts of people out of wood and paint them up, kind of cartoon people, and he could sing to them, and it helped him kind of like, it sounds a little weird, but at the same time, I go, well, that kind of makes sense, because if you think you're performing and you're on, you got to be on, because the whole studio process is so weird anyway. When I was in the Thorns with that band.
Yeah, that was the one with Matthew Sweet and
and Pete Droge. And Brendan O'Brien produced that record. And we were talking a lot about headphones and how we really wanted to go as old school as possible with the kind of vocal arrangements and how they were even mic'd. Like, hey, can we all get around one mic? Well, you better not go flat or sharp, because and
you won't be able to change it later.
We did some of it that way, but then some of it, it was like you sing the note, and then the other guy comes in and sings the same note, and the other guy comes in and sings the same note. Now you've got three voices doing the same part, and then you go to the next harmony part and do that.
Yeah,
and so that was kind of a different way of doing it, but. Yeah, that's my bass player.
That's all good. We're going to wrap up here shortly. I just wanted to ask you before we go, so what's next for Shawn Mullins? I mean, it's been about a year since the last record. Is there another one coming?
I'm writing. Always trying to write. I can't say that I've got a lot going right now with writing, because I'm building a little cabin in the woods.
Sweet. In Atlanta? Do you still live in Atlanta?
I live outside of Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's in the mountains, and so it's a great little place, and that's been taking up some of my creative energy, is being out there in the forest. But
that sounds awesome.
It is. It's good for me, because it'll be a good place to have a place for writing and maybe even making records one day.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the world's going so crazy. Like, all I really want is my own cabin in the woods that I can escape from everybody else. Yeah. So
that's my thinking.
That's really cool.
I guess it's white guys playing acoustic guitars.